Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished Last of Us Episode 6, Kin, and I've got to say, it's really impressive that the show continues to be just as bad as it has been throughout this entire season. It really doesn't know how to mix it up a little bit, because this episode is just as bad as all the others, if not as equal to the worst of them so far. Kin has a lot of issues, the customary ones of bloat, a lot of pointless dialogue, a lot of pointless scenes, pointless characters, a lot of pointless. This episode could once again, just like all its predecessors, be about 15 minutes long, and the audience would lose nothing of note whatsoever. Now, there are other issues with this that extend beyond the actual quality of the script itself. The script is pretty basic, CW basic at the very best, with some clunky dialogue, no character motivations, arcs, or development really, besides, of course, Joel being a crying bitch, apparently. That's about the only development we see in this entire piece. And that is where the normal stuff ends, because this is definitely the most politically infused episode so far. As we heard from Heel vs. Babyface before this episode came out, they do indeed have communist references that are just as blatant in your face and irrelevant, pointless, and nonsensical as the ones in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania with socialism. This episode is really impressively horrific, in fact, impressively horrific, and once again, like, no action. We get one fight scene at the end, which is literally just a head choke. That's what we get in this action adventure horror show, is a chokehold. Whoa, it's so good. And it's once again over an hour long, and it's so boring. But before I get any further, there will be spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. Now, just like in the game, the very basic plot is similar to a certain extent. Joel and Ellie travel across the country, meet his brother Tommy, Maria, and their group. Some shenanigans ensue with Joel trying to get Tommy to take Ellie to the Fireflies, and then he changes his mind at the last minute. But that's where the comparison to the game end, because I truly believe this is the least accurate episode of the series so far, with the exception of episode 3, which of course had nothing to do with the video game. It really was a completely different story in nearly every single scene. There's one scene near the end where Joel and Ellie talk in a bedroom, and Joel has a few lines, Joel and Ellie have a few lines taken directly from the video game. And so you get one scene poorly acted, and people act like this is the greatest adaptation of all time. No, you can't have one scene with some pieces of dialogue from the video game and call that an accurate adaptation. That's not how it works. But at the beginning, we have a 10-15 minute side plot, which once again, just like with all these episodes, they seem to not know how to begin, because you could cut out nearly every single opening of every single episode and lose nothing more than the rest of the episode, because the beginning opens with Joel and Ellie randomly breaking into this house in the woods and getting some information. They try to steal one of Joel's scenes from the game when he talks about, hey, you better point to the map at the same place your buddy does. But the problem is, this scene, it doesn't move things forward. We don't have any reason to be here. We could have inferred how they got to where they were with Tommy, because he already knew roughly where Tommy was. We didn't need this scene, and all that it served to do was, once again, with the political nature of this episode, because it is merely there for Native American representation, some Native American buzzwords like reservation, and fat representation. Once again, there is a woman who is like 300 pounds overweight in the apocalypse. That's a problem. In the apocalypse, food shortages are a massive issue, especially with, as confirmed in the show, much of the food that exists is contaminated by the fungus. So that makes the food scarcity an even bigger issue than it would otherwise be. But somehow this woman is just a giant whale who's like, I like them. It's just there for representation's sake. That is the whole point of that scene. And that's why they put it in, because besides that, it doesn't inform character. It doesn't open the scene up. It doesn't explain how they get from A to B in any way that is necessary. All it does is representation and further show that Ellie is a goddamn bitch. This is probably Ellie's worst episode, because she is just aggressively an ass throughout its entirety. She's always yelling. She's always growling. She's always snarling. This is not a good person. This is not someone that anyone in the audience should relate to or get endeared with. She is a terrible human being that I want to watch die, just because of how bad of a character she is. It's more ridiculous in this episode than any other. Now, there are some timeline issues from the video game adaptations. It's not really a big deal. They're in winter now. They weren't in winter at this point of the video game. Not super big deal, but the problem is that this entire show, just like the video game, takes place over a single year, and they've gone through most of the year already, and we're only barely seeing the Joel and Ellie relationship at this point. So they're condensing the end of the game into just a few weeks, it looks like, and that's going to be a problem because all that character development, that relationship development we got between Joel and Ellie wasn't condensed into just a few weeks like the show is going to do. It was spread out across an entire year. So having, we've just skipped 6 months in between when they left Boston to now they're in Wyoming, and we've barely gotten anything. That is a problem. The snow aspect, the winter aspect, not a big deal. The condensation of the timeline, that is an issue for relationship's sake. Now, they finally get away from this pointless Native American stuff and the representation stuff with the fat woman. She's really, really overweight. I'm not selling enough. She is extremely, oh my god, she is obese to a degree that is impossible in an apocalypse without proper justification, and there was none given at all. But then they meet up with Tommy and Maria and their settlement, and instead of just being a random settlement that's on a dam who's just doing the best they can, and Joel and Tommy haven't talked to each other in years because they had a falling out, in this one, they're a communist utopia. And I don't mean that as hyperbole. I mean that as Maria, who basically is the leader, even though she's on the council of democratically elected figures, is the one in charge of this, definitely in charge of Tommy. Tommy does not have a spine in this show, but she straight up calls it a commune. We're communist. They say it and they spend a lot of time on it. And Ellie goes, holy shit, it works. Going back to the age-old adage of communism never works, and then the people who want communism say, well, no one's ever tried it. So this episode is blatant political propaganda to be like, oh yeah, see, communism works. It's pointless, it's irrelevant, and doesn't make sense narratively. If you just wanted to show this nice little community and behind the scenes be like, yeah, we want this to be communist, that's whatever. You're not trying to preach necessarily, but they take time out of the already bloated episode to virtue signal and say, yes, we're communism. Yes, communism works. Isn't communism amazing? It's really poorly shoehorned in with no finesse whatsoever, similar to the line from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where Hank Pym just goes off about how socialism is like amazing and stuff. It's really blatant propaganda that I feel most people should see. This is blatant wokeness to a degree that most normies should be able to pick up on, and that's when you know it's really, really in your face, and this episode is full of it in a lot of different instances. But moving on, some of the relationship between Tommy and Maria doesn't necessarily make sense because, as established at the beginning of the series, Tommy just barely stopped talking to Joel, and established in this episode, he stopped talking to Joel because he met Maria. So they've only known each other for a couple months, Maria and Tommy only known each other for a couple months, whereas in the game, they spent years and years and years together. But they're married with kids. He's already integrated into their society fully. They trust him. He's a person of authority to a certain extent, well below her, of course, gotta be well below her, but he is a person of authority in the community enough that he can give away horses to his brother and Ellie. That's just a few months. That doesn't make any sense. How did he get so integrated to both her personal life and to this community in just a few months? Did he just knock her up and she basically said, hey, this is my baby daddy, give him all the respect? It doesn't work. It's not logical, there's not cohesion, and it destroys immersion when it's so stupid like that. And their entire relationship is built off him being, oh my god, Tommy, I'm like, here, oh, hi, Tom. Tommy is not a character in this. He is just a whiny, sniveling, oh my god, Maria, what do you want me to do now? He's really soft-spoken all of a sudden. He's pussy whipped. He's straight up pussy whipped. And Maria talks down to him, talks down to Joel, talks down to Ellie. Maria is just not a good person. They're not characterized in any sort of likable way. The few people who even have any sort of development or look like characters, have any characterization to them, they're all negative. There's not a single person who has characterization that has positive characterization. They're either weak and pathetic or they're bitchy and mean, just like the dynamic between Joel and Ellie. Joel being all, oh my god, please, what do you want? Oh, Ellie told me to come say congratulations. And Ellie just being a bitch, just like Maria. It's the same dynamic, and it's incredibly distracting and proof that they don't actually like these characters, in my personal opinion, because they are destroying every single one of these legacy characters to such a degree that it's blatantly aggressive and malicious. They've torn down Joel, Ellie, and now Tommy. Tommy's completely eradicated. He got his spine ripped out. He's just not Tommy and not a good character. and not a character that would have been able to survive an apocalypse. That's the bigger issue, is I don't see this little soft-spoken, timid little man surviving 20 years in an apocalypse. It doesn't make sense. Those ideas can't corroborate with each other, which again breaks immersion. But moving on, this show has an unhealthy desire to show the menstruation habits of a 14-year-old girl, from her getting tampons in a previous episode to her getting a diva cup from Maria, and then they have a conversation about it. Oh, it's really necessary. It's not necessary. We don't need to know about a 14-year-old girl's menstrual cycle. It is incredibly inappropriate and perverted to a certain extent. Do you want to know what a 14-year-old boy's masturbation lifestyle is like? No, because it's inappropriate. Does it happen? Absolutely. It's just not something that adults should be talking about in an environment like this, because it's not okay. But this show really wants you to know what's going on with Ellie's body, even though the show's not about that. It has no bearance on the plot. It doesn't develop her character. It's just like virtue signaling. Once again, political virtue signaling. We don't need this. It's not necessary, and it's disgusting. It is straight up perverted that they spend all this time. There's even images of inserting the diva cup into a vagina in the little pamphlet that she gets, showing her how to use it. It's totally inappropriate, and it leads into a conversation with Maria and Ellie positively affirming each other while arguing, because they're both really aggressive personalities who hate everything and everyone. During the argument, Maria just stops and says, "Oh, you'd make a good lawyer." Why? Because she's a dick? Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's totally the qualification. This 14-year-old girl swore at you a little bit. Clearly, she's a talented lawyer protege. What is she talking about? But of course, you gotta positively affirm the female characters between each other. We've seen this so many times. I'm sick of it. This show is woke. This episode is very woke. And I will firmly argue my case against people who say that it's not. I don't have anything against people who aren't seeing the wokeness, but this episode is incredibly blatant with the wokeness aspect of it, and I'm getting tired of it. It's really quite aggressive. We don't need this in a TV show. And to be clear, I don't want right-wing politics in this either. I don't want any politics. I don't agree with really either side. I'm not a political person. I don't want politics in my zombie apocalypse horror show. It's not what it's about. If you want to have deep themes that are thought-provoking and ask questions like a lot of old media did, absolutely go for it all day long. But you're making aggressive statements, including a conversation between Joel and Ellie where he breaks down the political system by calling Republicans people who just want to own everything and Democrats people who don't want you to own anything, breaking it down in a way that doesn't really make sense, but definitely comes out on the side of the Democrats because Republicans evil. Oh my God, it's disgusting, it's pointless, it's unnecessary, it's distracting, and ultimately destroys immersion. That is the biggest thing besides the bloat and the customary issues in this episode that are present in the rest of the show. It destroys immersion at every single possible opportunity. You take the wokeness out of it, you take a lot of the adaptation stuff out of it, and just look at the episode as it is. You take those scenes out. This would be a very less than mid episode, but pretty mid. Just kind of, it exists. CW, it's not good, but it's not bad. But because you inject those things into it, break immersion, it breaks the narrative, which means it's bad writing. And so yes, even though some of the stuff is fine, it's okay, it's CW dialogue, CW acting, and it's really pathetic, I'm gonna rate it lower because of their priorities and how misaligned they were in favor of the wokeness aspect of things rather than the talented storytelling side of things. The priority of the writers was clearly not about developing Joel in any sort of positive way whatsoever. And speaking of Joel, he straight up breaks down and cries about how he's having panic attacks. He's afraid. He's scared all the time. He's not strong enough to defend Ellie. He's getting old, and that's why Ellie had to save him in the last episode, because he's pathetic. He straight up says stuff like that. He straight up cries to Tommy. It's pathetic. They're breaking down Joel to such a degree that he's a sobbering mess, saying, I can't do anything anymore. I'm worthless. I'm pointless. Why would anybody like me? It was offensive to me as someone who played the video game. They don't like Joel. That was Neil Druckmann putting the 9-iron to his head like they did in Last of Us Part 2, and then spitting on his corpse, which that person who played it in Last of Us 2, who spit on Joel's corpse, was Neil Druckmann. He straight up spit on Joel's corpse. This is him doing it again with the desecration that they've done to his character. And now I wondered why in a previous episode that they aged up Joel. They said that Joel was 56 years old in the episode, which is significantly older than he was in the original game. That's how old he was in Last of Us Part 2. I wondered why they were going to do that. I thought, and I still think it might be because they want to kill him off at the end of this season rather than beginning of next, but it was probably, at least partially, because of this scene, because they wanted him to be a sniveling buffoon, saying, oh my god, I can't hear anything, I'm having panic attacks, I have bad dreams, and my heart stops because I'm so scared. He straight up says his heart stops because he's afraid. Yes, it's okay to be afraid, but Joel was always on point. He was always mission-oriented, and he always got stuff done. He wasn't randomly, literally just walking, having panic attacks. After they leave the fat couple in the woods at the very beginning, he randomly stops and she said Scary River. She said Scary River. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna have a heart attack. They despise Joel because in the game, he was a straight, white, strong male. And they're desecrating him as a result. Race swapping him wasn't enough for them. They have to keep bringing him down. They have to destroy this character in every way possible to prep the audience for the death that he has at the beginning of the next season or at the end of this one. They do not like Joel. They do not like The Last of Us. They despise the audience because they're straight up doing political propaganda, teaching you. They're straight up making a baseball bat like the person at the end and beating the audience over the head with it. Adaptation-wise, it is the worst episode adaptation-wise once again. The fight sequence was, oh, guy swings a bat, it breaks off, then he stabs Joel with the bat, and then Joel chokes him out. In an over hour-long episode, that is what we got in terms of action. This episode was purely political propaganda meant to destroy and debase the characters that we've come to know and love. Even Ellie and Maria are getting destroyed because of how blatantly evil these characters are and how aggressively horrible they all are. This is not The Last of Us. This is not a good TV show. This is not a zombie apocalypse horror show. This is a propaganda show meant to fix all the issues of Neil Druckmann's perspective of The Last of Us because he despises the original Last of Us. He wants to fix the so-called mistakes he made into it and reimagine it for a modern era. He has come out and said stuff like that, and it's really blatant at this point. I don't understand how anyone could like it from a quality standpoint, from an objective standpoint, but from an engagement with the object wokeness and propaganda aspect of it, I really don't understand how people could like this show at all whatsoever. If it were just about the writing of the episode, taking out the woke scenes, taking out the adaptation arguments, I'd probably give this episode a 4 out of 10. But because those do affect the narrative cohesion and the immersion capability, it does greatly decrease the quality of the episode. It deserves a 2 out of 10 because of the atrocity and the utter vitriol dripping from it for The Last of Us and The Last of Us's audience. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.
Hey, yo, are you feeling what I'm doing up in here? Oh, I know you are. Do you miss all the good, compelling stories that we used to get back in Hollywood that they ain't putting down no more? Oh, I know you missing it. So check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues, baby. Book 1, Down in Flames. Book 2, Apocalypse Then. These are currently on sale. What are you waiting for? Get your hands on them. And we got Book 3, Kill the Dark, is coming down the pipeline. Just wait for all the good stuff that's dropping. You ain't gonna be disappointed, fam.